It's Christmas Day 2024 when Azerbaijan Airlines flight 8243 crashes just a few kilometers short of Aktau Airport in Kazakhstan. It's the first time you heard that name probably, just as I did. But a commercial plane crashed and there were passengers on board, so it's news. Soon, an amazing amount of video and photo material popped up on the internet. As if people were waiting for this plane to land safely as it made strange movements in the sky, sometimes just barely keeping off the ground. A passenger plane had crashed, but little did we know that within 24 hours it became pretty obvious that Russia had just shot another passenger plane out of the sky, as they had done before just over a decade ago on July 17, 2014 with Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 and with Korean Air flight KE7 on September 1, 1983. Unfortunately, I predicted something like this happening back in July 2023 when Moscow was often the target of Ukrainian drones swarming the city, forcing airports to close and flights to divert. Little would I know that it would happen so soon, and that evidence pointing to it would get out so soon. In contrary to MH17, which crashed over the Donbas area in eastern Ukraine after it was shot out of the sky by a Buk surface-to-air missile fired by Russian infiltration and occupation forces that came marching into Ukraine in March 2014, information about the crash of Azerbaijan Airlines flight 8243 spread almost instantly. On this fateful Christmas Day, flight J28243 was operated by 4K AZ75, an Embraer E190. The airline took delivery of the plane in 2013 and has flown it without incidents until this crash. From the flight data sent by the plane over ADS-B, it is shown that the plane departed from Baku in Azerbaijan in the morning and flew towards Grozny in southern Russia. Some 30 minutes into the flight, at 4:25 UCT, it most likely encountered severe GPS interference. The plane then stopped sending data altogether for 12 minutes, after which flight data was received again, but this was most likely incorrect due to damage to the aircraft. Since the plane was now flying over the Caspian Sea, receiving data is much more difficult, so a big part of the flight over water was not recorded. The last 21 minutes of the flight though were recorded, and shows an erratic flight path where the plane dives and pulls up again before eventually crashing on the coast of the Caspian Sea, just a few kilometers short of the runway of Aktau Airport in Kazakhstan. Russian sources were very quick to point out that the plane had suffered a bird strike. Unfortunately for them, evidence would soon speak for itself. No evidence of that bird strike was ever delivered, most likely because that never happened. But what did happen? It is known that the plane was on its way from Baku to Grozny and was about halfway when something happened, as the plane stopped broadcasting data. An effort was made to point at Ukraine as well, stating that Grozny was under attack by Ukrainian drones, but that also faded away quickly as that was probably even more unlikely as a bird strike. After the first images of the crashed plane were published online, it became clear that a simple bird strike was out of the question. But other theories soon popped up. Based on damage seen on many of the pictures from the tail section, which broke off before the rest of the plane caught fire, it was clear something had exploded. As there are also a few clips from inside the cabin, recorded by passengers who thought that they were about to die, we can see that damage was not limited to the outside of the plane's body. There are signs of high-velocity impacts in the overhead bins, for example. As oxygen masks were released, at least some of them, there is an indication of a sudden drastic drop in cabin pressure. And if we look for a reason on why this could have happened, we will find video evidence of a penetration into the cabin from the outside. A passenger even sustained a wound to her leg from a foreign object. All in all, it's odd, very odd. And it certainly looks like something violently exploded. This was also confirmed by a few of the survivors. They told stories of an explosion that could be heard on the outside of the plane. This directly contradicts a story that surfaced earlier about an exploding oxygen canister. While the story on the ground was evolving with more and more evidence being uploaded by dozens, even hundreds of eyewitnesses, the Volkser country over to the north started their effort to spin the story their way, but came up empty-handed pretty quickly as there was an actual wreckage and survivors to tell the story. By now, a few days after the crash, it has become more than just likely that Azerbaijan Airlines flight 8243 was shot at with Russian military equipment, possibly a Pantsir S-1 air defense unit, which are known to have been stationed in Grozny. Directly after being hit, let's assume it was actually shot at, which is currently by far the most likely scenario, the pilots requested an emergency landing, but Russian authorities apparently denied them permission to land. The plane then made its way to an entirely different country across a huge lake, Kazakhstan. That's 300 kilometers of water before the airport of Aktau shows up. There are also a few other airports on the western side of the Caspian Sea which could possibly have been used for an emergency landing. We have to keep in mind though that the plane was damaged and possibly wasn't able to simply land somewhere nearby. As the area of Grozny had GPS jamming turned on high around the time the Embraer plane was hit, we can add the Russians purposefully not turning off or even extending a proper helping hand on the list of questions. Would the Russians have their plane fly over water for hundreds of kilometers on purpose in the hope the evidence would simply disappear under the waves of the Caspian Sea? You can of course say that the crash is purely an accident, which is fine by me. But we should not dismiss pretty clear evidence that has surfaced by now, even without any of the black box data being revealed. Even the Azeri authorities have already stated that they assumed the plane was shot at. On the contrary, it could be very possible that the pilots of the plane decided it was best to get the hell away from the danger zone and fly as far away as possible to preserve as much evidence as possible to help air crash investigators. If that's the case, the pilots did an extraordinary job. The immediate backlash of this crash is that a number of airlines have already announced that they would no longer fly to destinations in Russia or fly over Russian airspace. Among the first to announce such measures were El Al and Kazakh Air, both citing the safety situation. More airlines will follow with similar measures to protect their passengers and fleet from Russian aggression and big Russian whoopsies like shooting down planes. This will make Russia even more inaccessible, as using sanctioned Russian airlines has its own very specific safety risks. A lack of maintenance isn't directly visible either when you board as the passenger. On December 29, 2024, Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev has officially accused Russia of shooting down the plane. In a prepared statement, he said that it was very clear that the plane was shot at by the Russians, but that there currently is no proof that this was done on purpose. Aliyev criticized Russia's initial explanations, which included bird strike collisions and equipment malfunctions, as attempts to conceal the true cause of the crash. He also demanded that Russia should acknowledge its responsibility, apologize, and compensate the victims' families. The black boxes, which store vital information about the aircraft and cockpit conversations, have been retrieved and will need to be processed to possibly find out more about what happened to the plane just before and after it was shot at by Russia. Shortly after retrieval, Russia demanded that they will be sent to the International Aviation Committee of the CIS, Commonwealth of Independent States, of which Russia is a member. Kazakhstan has refused to do this though, and will send them to Brazil instead, as the plane was Brazilian-made. Another foiled effort from Russia to make this problem go away. While we most likely won't see any additional sanctions over this shooting down of a civilian aircraft and the attempted cover-up, it is likely that less airlines will fly to and from Russia from now on, further isolating the country for the time the midget gargoyle is running whatever shitshow he's running.